Shorewood Hills, Wisconsin, USA. In my search for people who were willing to tell their stories, I was taken to a quiet yellow house in the countryside. Surrounded by forests and lakes, you can almost forget that the Great Panic touched this place and that zombies scoured nearby houses just 10 years prior. Alex Mitchell, now 30, lives in his mother and father's house, which was given to him and his brother. He sits down to have some lunch. I remember I was in a trigonometry class in my second year of college when I got my first taste of what the virus could do. Finals were coming up and we still had some things to go over before then. I think we were going over inverse trigonometric functions or some boring shit like that. Anyway, I was sitting at my desk, half awake, trying to scroll down as much as I could. My teacher, I think his name was Mr. Roberts, was just about as bored as we were, with his monotone voice and blank expression. Now, you have to understand that normally he was a pretty quick and energetic guy. Long hair, unkempt clothes, and a laugh that sounded about as kill me now as a politician talking about gun control. He was the kind of teacher that wore a dinosaur hoodie to class. I shit you not, that's what he wore, that kind of guy. About a third into the class, some girl I didn't know the name of came into the room. She was blonde, maybe 5'8", wearing a striped sweater and jeans. She had really dark circles and wrinkles galore under her eyes. She looked like she had ran a goddamn marathon. Initially I thought, Jesus, I thought I looked like shit. I assumed that with the recent buzz of finals and projects, she was as gorked and exhausted as we were. I also noticed the bandage around her left ring finger, stained with some sort of brown hue, but I didn't really pay any attention to it. She didn't say a word as she went to her desk. I went back to scribbling down whatever numbers and charts I saw useful. How the hell am I supposed to memorize this? I remember muttering as my eyes kept darting from my page to the board. Page, board, page, board, page, board, up and down. He pauses to take a drink of his water. He offers me a drink, to which I decline. He clears his throat and continues. A little while later, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes later, the girl started making noises while her head was down. Mr. Roberts, God rest his soul, looked at her and told her to stop. She kept on making noises. She kind of sounded like a mix between the moans of a bored toddler and creaking metal. A really weird sound that you only hear in your dreams. Something only your brain can make up. Mr. Roberts started to get concerned about her. He asked her if she was okay, even getting up and going over to her desk when she didn't say anything back to him. She just kept on making those weird noises. He asked her if she needed to leave class. It was cold and flu season after all, what with Thanksgiving a few days before. He pulled her hood off, which I'm pretty sure was against teacher conduct, to show patches of hair missing from the top of her head. The fuck? I thought to myself. I looked around the room at others who seemed to be just as confused and concerned as me. Did she have cancer? Do we need to call somebody? Is she okay? These were questions I had racing through my head as she raised hers. It was slow and smooth, like a machine. Unnatural, inhuman. Her face met his. Her skin was grayed and covered with pockmark-like blemishes. Her eyes were cloudy and white, as if she were blind or something. My heart started to pound, so much so I could feel it in the base of my throat. She shot up from her chair like a goddamn rocket, teeth bared like some fucking wild animal. Her teeth sank into his neck. Blood and sinew sprayed everywhere. I don't remember much right after that. All I know is that I was jumping over my desk and practically tripping out into the hall. Others pushing past me, also trying to get away. My heart was about to rip out of my chest. You know that pain you get in your chest when you get jump scared? Just imagine that times 10. I couldn't even begin to process what just happened. It's like my brain just shit itself. I didn't even grab my stuff. My bag, my heavy coat, my headphones, they were all still in there on my desk. I didn't even bother going back for them. With a bloodthirsty corpse still in the room, that was not something I was gonna do. All I did was start running down the hall. My legs were on autopilot, not stopping for anything. I saw dozens of other students running in all directions. What were they running from? Were there more of them? What's going on? These were even more questions that raced through my head. Some were crying in corners, PTSD-like, with their feet to their thighs and their knees to their chins. Others, like the citizens of the 21st century they were, tried to call people on their phones. It didn't do shit. They were throwing them and screaming and everything. I mean, I get it. You're trying to quickly make contact with those who are important to you, but why where shit was happening? Why where people were literally beating each other to get out? I mean, would you try to make a phone call in places like D-Day or fucking Tiananmen Square? What? People just don't make any sense. Hell, some of them were even fighting each other over who would get out first. I remember seeing one guy literally take a textbook and swing it at someone's head. Jesus Christ. You'd think that people would see the bigger threat, the zombies, but you'd be mistaken. We're just really ass backwards like that sometimes. That's when my brain started going back to what happened in the classroom. You know those moments when your brain likes to be abusive to you? Those moments where it's like to relive traumatic events in 130% detail? Yeah, that's what happened. I saw my teacher's shocked face as that girl's teeth sank into his neck, the flesh ripping like silicone rubber from movies, the fountain of crimson spraying and oozing from his neck like those fancy alcohol commercials, the black gunk in her mouth, intermingling with the arteries of the man she used to call professor. You know what? I'm not hungry anymore. Going over to the trash can, he dumps the rest of his food into it. He sits back down. The next thing I knew, someone pushed me. I didn't see who they were, but they might as well have been a goddamn ox, because they sent me flying. I smacked my head on something hard and cold, probably a water fountain or something now that I think about it. My vision was blurry and hazy. I could sorta make out others running past me, not even turning their heads. My head was throbbing, pounding. I felt something warm and wet on my forehead. I felt up there only to have blood dripping down my fingers. He parts his hair to show a scar on the right side of his scalp. He sees me cringe slightly as he lets his hair cover it again. My vision started clearing up when I saw a figure coming towards me. He looked like the girl in the classroom. Gray, scarred skin, milky white eyes. But he looked worse. I consider him to be the real face of what we were up against. His cheeks were sunken in and shit, like a skeleton. His nose was missing and his cheek was gone, leaving nothing but a row of bloody, crooked teeth. Blood stained his shirt and his pants as he awkwardly shambled toward me. It was that kind of shamble that made it look like every bone in his body was broken. But they clearly weren't. He kind of reminded me of a puppet on strings, as if something like a ghost was possessing his body. Either that or someone who was just really, really, really drunk. I started kicking at the door, trying to make some space between me and the creature. I had only just gotten to my feet when he grabbed me by my hood. His grip was like the fucking Terminator, man. No matter how hard I pulled, he just wouldn't let go, as if he'd go to hell if he lost his grip. His teeth were so close to my face, man, dripping with spit and every other fluid under the sun. His squirming, moist tongue was just a few inches from my face. It was like something out of those scenes in movies where an alien or a dinosaur was sniffing out the hero or something, except I was really gonna die there. And the smell. Oh God, the smell. Jesus Christ. Think of it like a steaming pile of cow shit mixed in with burning tires and tuna. Have you ever smelled something like that? Later on in the war, it was everywhere, so you just got used to it. But at the beginning, the first time it meets your nose is something you're never gonna forget. Anyway, I unzipped my jacket and literally peeled out. The fucker could keep it for all I cared. I made my way to what I call the atrium. It was a large, high-ceiling area full of offices near the parking lot. Had a beautiful glass ceiling too. I normally sat in there to do some last-minute cramming for exams. As I came through the door, 5 people in tan shirts darted past me. One of them bumped shoulders with me, but they didn't seem to notice it. It was like I wasn't even there. I looked back at them to find that they were campus security. The fucking security was caught up in this dude. With their hands on their holsters, they pushed and weaved their way through the crowds around the corner towards the hallway where my class was at. I didn't have time to think, so I just kept running. I was about 2/3 across the atrium's main floor when I heard cracks. Crack, crack, crack. Gunshots. Fucking gunshots! The security was fighting them, the zombies. I couldn't even believe that such a battle was happening so close to me. Normally, at least normally for me, things like these only happen in movies or on the nightly news. You know those situations that you know for certain won't ever happen to you. A small, sick, twisted part of me wished I could have seen such a spectacle. Unfortunately for me, I got my wish. Later on in the war, we learned that everything this side of the Rockies was fucked. They were leaving the whole thing. The military, the government officials who were in Washington at the time, the National Guard, everybody, they were fucking leaving. Not even a day after we heard that news, we decided we were leaving too. We packed as much shit into our cars as we could and took off for the nearest military base, the Wisconsin Army National Guard, 115th Air Wing Base. On the drive there, we saw all kinds of panic and fear. People were literally sprinting to their cars, hauling their kids or pets in with them. I even saw one crazy guy shove a fucking blow-up doll into his trunk. Many of them had the same idea as us, since they were going the same way we were. I even saw some of them with bandages stained and smeared with the same brown hue as that girl. I knew they were going to die. When we got there, soldiers were blocking the gates with trucks and other personnel. It was fucking crazy. People were practically throwing themselves at the soldiers. Insults I hadn't even heard of were just being hurled into their ears, forced our way to the front of the crowd. We were a military family, with my dad having served in the Second Gulf War, my mom served in Egypt, and my grandfather in Vietnam. We hoped this would convince them to take us with them out west, where it would be safe. God, it felt like we were there for an eternity. Me, my brother, and my little cousin, who was staying with us at the time, stood there as my parents and grandparents pleaded with the soldiers. They even whipped out their military IDs as a form of proof they were ex-military. As if by the luck and grace of God, they reluctantly let us through. I don't know how or why, since they weren't hosting a civilian evacuation, but I thank God that they did. They stripped us down and checked us for bites or any other signs of infection. They let us put our clothes back on and ushered us to where they were loading up. I just then noticed that we left our stuff in the cars back outside the fort. A small part of me was like, oh shit, we forgot our stuff. To be honest, the other 95% of me didn't even care. We were going to be safe, relatively, if not completely. They shoved all of us, at least me and my family, into the back of an APC and shut the doors. I felt the vehicle lurch forward as we started moving. I didn't notice it until I looked out the window, but we barely got out of there in time. As we pulled away, dozens of zombies came out from the wood line. They must have been attracted to the sound of the crowd. God damn. They had a feast. They just limped over and sprang into the crowd, noshing on whoever they could grab. Men, women, children, it didn't matter. As long as they filled their bellies, they were happy. Gunfire rang out as soon as they started eating. People were scattering everywhere, tripping and falling on their asses and even on their kids. Some ran off into the woods trying to escape the carnage. Some of the people running to the woods got grabbed by the horde and were pulled to the ground, their intestines painting the leaves and their screams serenading the air. Others made a break for the base, their legs pumping as fast as humanly possible toward what few trucks were still there. They were shot not a few seconds later, their lead-riddled bodies hitting the pavement. The horde slowly advanced further toward the base, round after round being pumped into them. The only feedback they got from those freaks were little pops and bursts on their bodies from the bullets that slammed into them. It did jack shit. The whole scene disappeared behind a thick grove of trees as we rolled away. The noise did too. It was the last time I saw the 115th Air Wing National Guard base until after the end of the war. He goes quiet for a few minutes before I utter my first question. So, what happened after you left Wisconsin? Did anything else happen? Surprisingly, not much. A day or two of driving later, we reached the California state border. They rounded us up from the vehicles and ushered us into tents for examinations. They checked us for bites, any signs of sickness like fevers, breathing problems, and other stuff. It was pretty uneventful, at least for being stripped down and felt all over. Dogs sniffed us as an extra security measure, since they could smell the disease and a visual examination wasn't enough to guarantee our safety. Where did you stay? Well, after they checked us for the virus and the other things, they put us on buses to take us to somewhere we could call home. You might be inclined to say Los Angeles, but no. We actually stayed in Sacramento for the rest of the war. High watchtowers, snipers, guard dogs, and enough guns to make a cowboy blush. It wasn't particularly welcoming, but at least it was safe. It wasn't long until we got assigned jobs in the city. Lucky 18-year-old me and my father were assigned manual labor to help with fortifying whatever cracks and holes were in our security perimeter. Sure, there weren't any zombies this far past the Rockies, so they weren't an issue, but God, it was tiring. Working 8 to 10 hours a day in the California heat, lifting heavy metal bars and barbed wire wasn't easy, you know. My brother and my mother weren't assigned anything since my mom has a bad back and my brother has a heart condition. So my brother was tasked with taking care of my mom. My grandparents weren't assigned anything either, but my grandfather, a brave old soul, volunteered to help with securing the fences. I guess it was during that time that I learned to shut up and be grateful for the circumstances I'm in. Because for all I know, it could have been a hell of a lot worse. He looks around the room for a minute before looking back at me. Sorry about that. I just get really distracted when I think about what happened. I guess you got a story within a story for me. A bonus. Anyway, where was I? I was running across the atrium at college. I heard shots. Oh yeah. I fell on my knees, and many others did too. I wasn't hit or anything. I guess it was just some sort of instinct for me to just drop when the shots started. I looked at others around me, all panting and damp with adrenaline-laden sweat. I gotta tell you, their eyes were wide enough you'd swear they just saw hell. Maybe many of them did that day. Maybe I did that day. I picked my ass up and started hauling myself toward the front doors. I ran to where the parking lot was to get to my car, pushing and shoving like the others. I saw others who had the same idea, friends and sometimes complete strangers getting into cars, groups at a time. People were in truck beds too. The road out of the campus was flooded with cars, all honking and blaring. You couldn't even fit a quarter edgeways between them. It was that tight. Many of them were screaming, just so fucking on edge. Some people even got out and started to beat the shit out of each other, some with their fists, others with books and other things like the guy I saw inside. I swear, I heard some of them shouting racist shit like there was no tomorrow. Stuff like, you better move, you stupid little or I ought to beat your ass. Seriously? They're really gonna pull the "you're the wrong color" card on each other? Humans, when they had creatures literally 30 feet away that didn't give a shit what you looked like? I mean, what the fuck? Alex breathes for a moment, trying to regain composure. Sorry, I just get so worked up when things like this happen. My parents always did say I had a strong sense of fairness and justice. It was just pure anarchy that day. I saw my car, a 2018 Chevy Malibu, sitting at the end of the lot. I love that car. It was a gift from my parents. I nearly smacked my face into the pavement running to it. I got inside and slammed the door and started it. As I put the car in gear, I saw zombies trickle out of the school towards the sea of cars, towards the noise, towards the food. God damn, there were so many of them. It was like a long gray wall stretching its arms around you. You know, actually, it was more like a herd of cows, all stinking to high heaven and mindlessly stumbling toward the next source of food. It reminds me of that horde I saw later at the 115th Air Wing. I didn't even know how there were even that many. Maybe there were more infected who attended classes that day? I don't know, probably. They swarmed around the blockage, some even climbing onto the hoods of cars and slamming themselves into the windshields, trying their damnedest to get a bite of those who were inside. Others were smashing side windows and squirming their way through the frames, cutting and thrashing themselves on glass, screaming. Terrified faces of those who were trapped in their little death boxes were what met the dead. I tried to tell myself not to look while I started driving. By the time I backed out of my spot, someone slammed up against the driver window. It scared the shit out of me. I thought I was going to end up like those on the road until I looked at them. He was a young man, maybe 19 or 20. He had short blonde hair, greenish blue eyes, and was wearing a shirt with an NES controller on it. He was frantically begging for me to let him in. Please, you gotta fucking let me in. Please, man. I remember him saying. Maybe wondering why I would remember such stupid details, right? Why the fuck would I, in the middle of a zombie attack, something that defies nature itself, remember someone's clothes or face like that? Well, I was just about to let him in, my finger on the button, when I saw something on his left upper arm. It was a bite mark, still dripping wet and oozing blood and brown gunk. It was like a flashback when I remembered that girl in class. She had the exact same brown stuff coming out of her. I immediately yanked my hand away from the unlock button on my console. I looked at him, looked at the horde, and then back at him. I started shaking my head like crazy. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I sped off into the grass and around the blockage, looking at him in the rearview mirror. I saw what I had done. His eyes well up with tears as he pauses. They pulled that guy to the ground and ripped him apart. I killed him. I left him to die. Jesus fucking Christ. I know he was bitten, but... God. Tears stream down from his face as he looks at me. His voice cracks and is shaky. Whoever said that time heals all wounds is full of shit, I'll tell you. A goddamn lie, told across generations. Shit like that doesn't go away. It never goes away. Things like this cling to the back of your mind like a goddamn parasite. I've tried to put it behind me, try to live like I used to, but there's just no way that can happen. Every time I think, I just see his face, the terror-stricken, teary face of a person that I killed. I know he was bitten. I know there wasn't a goddamn thing I could do to help him. But I just can't help but feel like I killed him. I let him get ripped apart. I just hope God can forgive me for leaving him there all these years ago, because I can't. I just fucking can't. I try to ask him some further questions, but he refuses to speak any further. He allows me to stay a few minutes longer before ushering me outside.